Hello, everyone, and hello, Violetta. Welcome here to our Teacher Mindset Matters. We have this live series every month, and this episode is about productivity. But we are going to look at productivity from different angles. And I have to say, these angles are quite uncommon for me. So I'm very grateful to you, Violetta, that you scheduled this time with me because we could speak about what productivity actually means to so many people and what it means to both of us. And today's topic is only a slave thinks in terms of productivity. And very often, basically, I'm going to sum up what we are going to speak about is about productivity being linked with our worth. So we link our worth to how much we produce, either how many lessons we have, how full our calendar is, or how much we actually do, how busy we are, and then when we feel worthy. However, if we don't do all of this, we sometimes don't even feel good enough and worthy enough. So today's session is going to be about how can you feel worthy without actually doing nothing at all. And Violetta, now I will let you to introduce yourself, and then I will ask you so many questions that I can't wait for you to answer.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for having me here, and hello to your audience. It's a privilege to be live on air with you. My name is Violetta Ramnarace, V for short. I am a positive intelligence coach, a business ICF coach and member, and also a lecturer at the University Merito in Wrocław, Poland, currently. And before that, I was a business manager and a project manager. I still lead my organization that I've set up, which is a supplementary school, but in a different capacity as a trustee, is a charity. So my hats varies from being employee, employer, a leader, and a coach. So various supportive and leading roles, which led me to look at the productivity in a very common and very standardized way, which is how I use the resources and how other people use the resources that I provide them with, and then measure whether that output outperform the input, because otherwise, if we're in deficit, then we would classify that as unproductive time. So I was always interested in how much do I produce and how much my employees produce for our organization in order to determine whether we are productive or not. But that terminology comes from industrial world, isn't it? And at some point we applied it to humans, to people. We are not machines. Yes, we do produce, but is it always something that can be measured in a unit per time ratio, which is the definition of productivity? Do we always have to have a tangible results of what we produce as humans, as people, as an effective unit, a member of a society? I had a different take on productivity after I've worked with volunteers, after I've had to set up the wages at the minimum level because we were a charity, so we couldn't compete on salaries with private sector. I looked at productivity differently when my currency was appreciation and thank you, as opposed to a higher paycheck. And then I went even further when I came across a really interesting philosophical almost question from someone who was very much an industrialist and an inventor. And I want to share that with you. So the question that stopped me in my tracks was this. Before someone told you or convinced you or expected you to do something in return for something, what were you thinking about? Philosophically, what were your thoughts?
So am I the one who is asked to do
Yes,
something, but in return for something?
yes.
It feels like exchange of energy, of depending good services. Sometimes it can be fairness. Sometimes it can be transactional. Depending how you look at it, what does it mean to you, or what is the answer actually?
Well, one of those questions where answer is going to be very personal, but what is calling us to do is to stop and think, if we didn't have to do something in exchange for something that is measured, that is assessed, that is remunerated, what would be our choice of things that we do?
So basically, if we didn't get anything in back in return, would we still do whatever we are asked to do or called to do?
Or if we were not um, expected to deliver something in particular, either in exchange of something or as a condition to something, to receiving something. So, in essence, we want to, at some point, stop and think, what actually is my value if I don't produce something that someone else finds of value?
That's a very good question. I wonder if anyone who is watching us now, or even will be watching the recording, if you know the answer. To be honest, I consider productivity some time ago to be that day when I do a lot of things, a lot of useful things, a lot of things that I feel they have impact. But then I burn out. So I
It is
started questioning what productivity actually means.
a recipe for burnout because you, from what you described, you gradually moving away from self-realization. Even if your tasks and your activities are small steps on the road of achieving your goal, and your goal is aligned with what your values are, on the way, not focusing or not being present, not taking time to self reflect, is creating obstacles to awareness and presence. There's another quite significant relation between productivity and slavery, mental
Okay.
slavery.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when when you're truly free, you won't define yourself as how much you need to do. When you're truly free in your thinking and in your self-fulfillment, you place focus on who you are and not what you do.
Okay.
This is not mutually exclusive. This is not to say just sit and think and ponder and meditate. No, this is to say things that you do are there to get you somewhere. However, they must never replace the value that you attach to you being in a state of presence when you don't do those things.
Okay, so let me just link it to the topic for today and put this goal into a new perspective. So basically, we are not saying you shouldn't have goals. What we are saying is that we shouldn't be slaves to our goals. So if our goal is the master and kind of like decides about our emotional state or mental state or how we feel about ourselves, if we achieve it or not achieve it, then it means we are slaves to our productivity, to our goal. But if we are in charge and in control, we use our goals as a tool as a servant, let's say, to help us be happy, present, alive, and fulfilled. So basically, is that what you are saying, Violetta?
You're putting it very well, actually. Yes, the slavery is when we don't spend time being present with ourselves, with others, and when we don't use our freedom to just choose not to do anything or something. So for our businesses, when we choose to take a break or sit still or enjoy our free time, we should not feel guilty if this is a choice that is a part of the bigger picture. That if we are not productive in the economical sense, i.e., there isn't an output that we can measure. For example, if you sit on the beach and you're watching the waves, and that relaxes you, inspires you, that allows your mind to tap into your creativity, you haven't produced anything that you can measure as such. But if you sit at the beach with your laptop and you create your course that you're going to offer to your clients, that's also something that you produce and you can tangibly touch and measure. You produced 5 pages within 1 hour. But when you spend the same time on reflection or self-examination, you haven't got anything tangible, but it can be just as productive as writing those 5 pages, because you might have then self-reflect and identify a gap in what you do, and perhaps you got in touch with your clients' pain points on a deeper level, and something occurred to you, which then you can take and input into your marketing strategy.
Okay, so let's say there is a teacher who wants to be a teacher entrepreneur, and many of the teachers I meet, I come across, they measure their productivity based on how much they manage to do, how many new leads they have, how many new sales sessions they achieve, how many new clients they have, or how many posts they made on LinkedIn. And when they have days when they are not consistent and they don't have energy to do any of this, they don't really feel good and consistent. And then they feel like this is not for me. But basically, what you are saying is that it's okay to do those tasks. But if you just let those tasks to determine how you feel about yourself and that you are worthy and good enough just because you produce something, that's not necessarily productivity, or not the only definition of productivity. Productivity can be when you're in silence and you just relax, and maybe in that silence come the best ideas for your courses, for the new leads, for the new programs.
That's exactly that. And you can enslave yourself by aiming for making every minute of your day a productive time in terms of the classical definition of productivity. So that's where you enslave yourself. That's where your thinking becomes not free, but dependent on your actions.
And there are these people who want to wake up at 5 a.m. There are people who wake up naturally at 5 a.m., but some people feel like I'm only worthy and successful if I manage to join this 5 a.m. club. And then I wonder, how is this true for everyone, Violetta?
That's a very good question, because without actually stopping and looking inwardly and realizing that certain forms of productivity are not aligned or coherent with you as a person, with your energy, with your style of working, with your biological clock. Not everyone can effectively spend day on 4 hours sleep. If you realize that, and if you have enough self-awareness to notice your natural preferences and your natural strengths, then you can adjust to it. And with the slave mentality linked to productivity, you won't be able to do that, because you will only be thinking of having every minute of your day productive in the classical economical materialistic way. So this is an invitation to examine and audit yourself and the way you perceive productivity and self-worth, how you look at and use the so-called unproductive time in order to reach self-fulfillment. You most likely, and that's my wild guess, if you trying to build your own business, it is one of the ways that you want to achieve self-realization. You want to fulfill certain desires of yours, because no one most likely made you build that business or forced you to build that business. It was your choice. As limited as perhaps sometimes for some people it is, they have no other better choice, so they go to build their own business. But nevertheless, that activity is a way of you reaching certain fulfillment. So unless you align your fulfillment with your activities during the day, part of it being the way you perceive productivity, you have a very small chance of reaching that goal.
Okay, so we touched on two very important things from what I can hear. One is whatever task you are doing, it's best when they are linked to your bigger why, because then you will be in a way choosing and feeling fulfilled doing those tasks because it's connected to what you truly want and what truly matters to you. We can touch more on it and we can speak about it. But another one as well, you mentioned that maybe this 5 a.m. collab is for some people and it's okay, but it's not for everyone. So if we join it, we won't necessarily be productive. Maybe because, as you said, our daily cycles or like lifestyle is different. Maybe we would like to wake up at 9 a.m. but then stay up until late. And I've learned just recently that actually men, even and women, work differently on different cycles. So male cycle is like everyday cycle, whereas female cycle is like monthly cycle. So when we work around our cycles and around our energy correctly, then we can be productive in the right way. So I wonder about this productivity and the bigger why. What does it exactly mean? Because sometimes we have to do the things we don't really want to do because they will bring us to our bigger why. Let's say I have a business as a teacher entrepreneur, and as part of the business, you have to make yourself visible so that people can find you. And many teachers don't like the idea of reaching out to people on LinkedIn, message them, or even make a post. They feel like this is when they feel like slaves. It's a routine. They don't like it. But they know why they started their business. So they want to go for their business. So, how would you now kind of look at this in terms of productivity?
What is productive for you is not always productive for someone else who does those things for the same purpose. I, for example, higher visibility on social media. Productivity in that sense is the metrics of a mechanical activity as opposed to of a sovereign, creative, energy thinking and ease and flow type of activity. So I can achieve presence in media that I need for my business in more than one way. And yes, there is a prescriptive, perhaps, or tested method that people use. But even that strategy you can deploy in different ways. Example being, if you sit and try to create posts and schedule your videos, if this is not congruent with who you are, then what you produce within this time unit, let's say 3 hours, the chances are it's not going to be of the same value, matching value, when you go away and for 3 hours do something that is aligned with you. For example, maybe record very casually on the phone stick a conversation that you had with someone in your network, maybe in your neighborhood, maybe your former client. So you can put the same material on the media platform where you become visible, but it will be received most likely differently because you produce it from a different energetic place. And your productivity then would be 3 posts in the morning that you spent 3 hours to create versus 1 10-minute interview that was full of authenticity and truthfulness about you and someone else that you spoke to.
So there are options and choices you have to achieve certain task, and you have to look at what you would enjoy, what would make sense to you, and what would be aligned with how you prefer to do things. But let's say we have some teacher entrepreneurs who want to have their teaching business and they want to teach at a higher age students that they pick, so they have their own niches, but they don't really want to do the marketing part at all. They feel like it's a routine, it's boring. And maybe they don't use the word slave, but they say kind of like, this is the most boring thing. And actually, I'm doing the actual teaching 20% of the time, and 80% of the time it's marketing. So, how could you help, or how could we help these people feel worthy, kind of fulfilled, but at the same time linked to their bigger why?
If they really want to teach other people because they feel they've got something to offer to them, my suggestion is to ask yourself a question: how can I help those people whom I haven't met yet, my potential clients, find me? And this will be something that will direct them to how they need to make themselves known to their potential clients, because unless the potential clients can find out about them, they're going to be the best kept secret and they're not going to help anyone.
So basically, there are some things we kind of like have to do, because we say like only slaves have to do certain things. But even if you are fully aligned with your why, you know your goal, you know this needs to be done. So basically, there are some things that needs to be done. We just question the way, how we do those things, or how we get them done.
That's right. And those things that need to be done, you've got some choices around what are those things that need to be done. And if if you feel pardon me, pressure that it has to be done, although I don't like doing it, I would invite you to examine the reasons why you feel about it that way. And is the focus on me? I don't like to be in front of camera. I don't like to be writing about myself. Or is the focus on my client? How is my clients going to know that I can offer them those lessons if I don't tell them that I exist? Who do we care about when we resist a certain activity?
Okay, so where is the
What
focus?
are we driven by? What we want or what our clients' needs are that we're trying to meet and help?
I guess there should be the right balance, right? So like we need to look at their needs and to make ourselves visible, but at the same time, we want to choose the ways that are pleasant to us.
That's right. It's research that we do, is the examination, is the experimentation. You questioning what you like, what you don't like, and why you don't like it. And you put in balance what your needs are and what your clients' needs are. They need to be aligned enough for you to take action, and that will produce the output that you're after. If you remain unaware that you are slave to productivity, you will be very busy doing things that would lead you to perhaps feeling of very dissatisfied with yourself and with the outcome, perhaps very burnt out because you didn't stop enough to recoup and recharge. And you will not notice when this moment comes until you're already in it.
So, for example, when you do something which seems to be unproductive in the eyes of other people of our society, how do you manage to stay in this feeling of being worthy?
That's a very good question, because unless you know and you redefine productivity for yourself, what it means to you, what output you get out of that activity, no one else can tell you that, particularly if it doesn't look like the standard productivity activity, which is, writing, working, etc. I remember this situation I had at work. We were in an open space office, and around this space we have few workstations, and different people at different seniority level were sharing that space. So you would have someone very senior who writes policies for the department, and you would have a admin assistant or perhaps financial officer. So at the time, I was sitting almost opposite a lady who was a policymaker. Her desk was positioned next to the window. Mine was diagonally facing her. My job was information and data management, so I was engraved in IT and the data. She was engraved in thinking and conceptualizing certain outcomes that she would design the policy around in order to get results for the residents that this policy would serve. So her work was conceptual, was creative, was required quite a lot of thoughtful thinking. Mine was more logical, analytical, inputting, and sort of operational based. And I remember feeling quite a uncomfortable jealousy that she could sit next to the window, look through the window, admire the trees, or watch people walking by, while that was work that she was doing, because she was thinking, she was analyzing, she was predicting, whereas I was inputting data, doing calculations, drawing diagrams, and that was me doing, typing. I was also thinking, of course, but that was a completely different productivity that was expected of me or expected of her. And
So,
without us understanding that difference, she looked very unproductive, just sitting there and looking through the window. I looked very productive, but one can ask the outcome, what value does that bring to the organization, what I produced versus what she produced?
but would you say your work was less meaningful or her work was less meaningful?
That's exactly the question that people need to ask themselves when they are busy being productive. Because who is there to say what the value of her work and my work versus what the organization requires? It is not my employer, but ourselves. We also attach a value to our own work and to work of others. So we need to know the context, and we need to know the measure by which we define the productivity.
So basically, it could as well mean that you have a goal, and you work on the task towards that goal, you still haven't achieved the goal, you haven't even come close to the goal, but you have made some progress. So basically, you acknowledge and celebrate whatever progress you've made.
That's
Would
right.
that
And it could be very productive. The fact that you were working on it, you
Mm,
hit the block, you didn't progress beyond it, but you gain awareness of what is blocking you, and you figure out that next time, this is the step I'm going to take to overcome it. That's alone would have had a more productive value, because you've taken lesson for the next time, as opposed to just doing the doing stuff. So it all depends on the context of the
mm.
situation and what you value in your own work.
But basically, this looks like a very healthy mindset when we look at it this way. But when you're in that moment, and I'm speaking from my own experience, I was a slave, and I think I still sometimes am quite a slave
Mhm.
to productivity. I just felt upset. I have a list of things for the week. I call them smart priorities. They are linked to my bigger why, they are linked to my goal, so they make sense why I do them. And sometimes, maybe some of them I don't do during that week, I do them the next week on Monday. And I feel bad about myself, like I haven't done my smart priorities for the week. So, what do I say to myself in that moment?
Well, this is why we've got positive intelligence framework to help us reframe certain unhelpful attitudes or thoughts. This is where you do a scan of what you're thinking and how helpful those thoughts are. Now, is
Mm.
it in the moment when you feel it, it's a signal? The decision is, do I allow it to last for I don't know how long? Or do I allow it to be a data for me, which I then use and input into my brain computer? So the practical step or tool would be something that positive intelligence mental program is teaching us. So you can do a PQ at that time, which is the PQ repetition of your mental muscle. So that's why we've got certain tools where we can deploy in those moments. And you're right, we all are slaves to productivity one time or the other. However, without being aware of it or having tools to deal with it, we stand a very little chance of breaking free or even becoming aware that we are in that slave mentality.
Yes, so it's just reframing. Another thing that came to my mind was like a few years ago, I would manage so many things in one day that maybe it would take like 3 months to some other people. And I got used to it. I was highly productive. That's how I called myself. And then just 2 years later, I had a massive burnout. It was actually last year, at the beginning of last year. It was so massive, I struggled to get up and just get out of bed. And maybe I would do like 5% of the things I would usually do with ease and joy. So like out of like 80 or 100%, I would do 5%. And I felt miserable. I felt like, what's the point of life? I'm meaningless. Why am I here? I had these existential questions, and thank God I had a psychologist. And she kind of like encouraged me to follow these principles. I put them in 3 steps. She didn't say to me, these are the 3 steps, but the very first one was have respect to yourself for where you are right now. Whatever stage you are right now, whatever state of mind, it's okay. So have respect for yourself. The second one was don't compare yourself or even to others, but to yourself, to where you were a few years ago, how productive you were. Just take the day as it is. Right now, whatever energy you have 1% of energy, use that. You have 80% today, use that. Go with what you have available. And then she said the third thing is only if you want to reframe it, look at it as a gift. What have you learned about yourself in those moments when you seemingly didn't produce anything meaningful? Maybe you learned about yourself that you are still loving as a person, even though you do nothing. And that really hit me, that I don't have to
Wonderful.
produce.
No, those are beautiful 3 steps. Very, very structured. So there is a clear logic in it. Another tool would be maybe less structured,
Mm-hmm.
and something that we probably don't use on ourselves, is that whenever we feel self-criticism or self-judgment, the best antidote for self-judgment is self-empathy. So
Mm.
lots of people, my clients say that to me very often when we discuss empathy, is that they find it fairly easy to show or feel empathy for others. But we are not, particularly in the Central Europe cultures, raised in the culture of showing empathy to yourself. That is often perceived as self-indulgence. So one of the tools that you could deploy if you start feeling unproductive in this traditional sense is to give yourself empathy. Look at yourself as someone who deserves just as much kindness as someone that you care for or
Mm.
about, and you want someone else to feel your empathy. So just direct it towards yourself, not because you deserve it, but because you want to get rid of your self judgment at that particular moment.
So how can you feel this empathy for yourself? What helps, Violetta?
Well, first of all, it helps to remember that when you were born and you were a child, you didn't need to earn anyone's love.
You
Yes,
were loved automatically. You received
yes,
all the love. Mm.
yes, you were just a beautiful human being that deserved the love and care those around them, and you didn't need to earn it. Now, I'm not talking about the pathological families where things are screwed. I'm talking about just a pure human being who is full of beautiful essence and value. Now, what you were born with as a value or as a pure essence of you is still there, regardless of your age now. How visible and how easy it is to get to it, it depends on what you've gone through your life and how many layers you manage to cover your essence with. So,
Mm.
what I would say to answer your question is remind yourself of you being a young child who didn't need to work for love and were still pure and innocent and ready to be loved.
So basically, you connect yourself to this little child inside you that is always there and your pure essence. I know there are some people who like to feel this empathy through their pets because they love their pets and they feel this love for their pet and then they bring this love and empathy towards themselves.
Mhm.
So empathy is the antidote to judging ourselves and criticizing ourselves when we feel we are not productive. That's
That's
a
right.
very good example. And actually, at the very beginning, I mentioned, what if productivity had nothing to do with how much you have done, but how much present you have become? And actually, I had one situation as part of the charity where I am the chairperson of. I had a period when I didn't do much, literally very little. And I wanted to resign and say, like, I'm not doing anything. Why do you keep me here? Why don't you kick me? Like I'm not doing anything. And the director, the actually founder of the charity, said, it's not about what you do, Steffi, just your presence is enough. You listen to me every Friday for half an hour. This is more than I would love to get from anyone. It's more than you think. And I felt like just me being there on the phone listening to you and not even saying anything kind of like meaningful or having some tips. And she said, yes, it's enough. And that was for me something like phenomenal because I felt again, the more I do, the more worthy I am. That wasn't the case.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that, because that captures exactly the essence of the topic today. So I'm very grateful that you've put it
Mm.
in front of us like that, because I just can't add anything to it. It's just exactly what it is about. The presence. The presence is the measure of your sovereignty, of your existence, your freedom to exist. Whereas productivity can capture us in this traditional meaning into a matrix of doing and producing and being.
Yes. And what I want to do, I want to challenge everyone who is watching us now live and who is then watching the recording to challenge yourself for the next 7 days for 5 minutes every day, doing nothing, literally doing nothing productive, just nothing, and still feeling good enough and worthy enough. Because it's easy to feel worthy and good enough when we have done a lot of cool stuff and good productive things. But if you do nothing productive in this kind of definition of what is productivity, and you still feel good enough. So I wonder how many want to take up this challenge, but I'm going to take it up myself. Just maybe staring through the window or at the ceiling or just sitting on the public transport without needing to listen to another podcast or answer another message.
That's right. Wonderful. And what I would, if you want to take it a notch higher,
Okay.
5 minutes, you're doing absolutely nothing using the definition of productivity. So you haven't produced anything that can be measured. And then if you feel that that was a waste of time, deploy empathy. Look at yourself as a little child as you were when you were sitting and doing nothing. Were you criticized for it then, or were you just loved as you were because you were a child?
That's such a good example. Let's look at children around us or even our pets, and they do nothing. But that's why we want them so much in our lives because they are still worthy of love, and appreciation just because they are, not because they do anything.
And I
Um,
know the critic will just jump in with the voice saying, yes, but they're children, they don't have bills to pay, etc., or responsibilities. And that is all true. That's why we're saying sit still for 5 minutes and not 5 hours.
5 minutes and 5 hours, exactly. That's a good point. And even like enjoy your presence in everything you do. So of course we have to do tasks, we have to pay for bills, but still
Mhm.
see yourself as a person, not just the outcome of what you do, of your actions. So Violetta, what I want to do, because it's been really interesting talking to you, and I want everyone to be able to connect with you. So I'm just going to share my screen and share your details so that people can connect with you, potentially even ask you questions if they have any questions. And I wonder if there is anybody here that has questions. You can ask questions, or maybe even Violetta. What are the questions you would like to ask and answer as well? Not just ask, but answer too. Okay. So this is Violetta, and her. This is the QR code for your WhatsApp or for your LinkedIn.
This is a QR code for the contact form
Mm-hmm.
where you can contact me, get in touch, or receive a link to a free assessment for your inner critic.
Good, amazing. So just connect with Violetta, and you can have a little assessment about how strong is your inner critic. Anything else you would like to add to our conversation today? Your
Just
takeaways?
leave your audience with this thought. How do you feel when someone says doing more with less? What thoughts come to mind? And examine your definition of productivity for your own purposes. Other than that, I just want to sincerely express my gratitude for having me here and giving me opportunity to speak with you, Steffi, and share this with your audience. I really enjoyed this conversation, and you ask hard questions, so I feel
Mhm.
really stimulated. Thank you.
I felt like I could afford to ask you these hard questions because you're always so good at going deeper with me. And I don't know if I introduced you at the very beginning that you are a fellow coach, positive intelligence coach. You mentioned that. And it is amazing like how we can go deep in a coaching session with our clients. So it's not just about the goals they set, some kind of like external goals, but we go really deep down to their core, to their essence, and ask some deep questions. So you inspired me, Violetta, to speak about this topic and actually to redefine the word productivity. I have to say, I've learned so much with you this week when we were just discussing this prior to this live event. So thank you so much for being here. And
Yes, my pleasure too.
let's do more with less.
Let's do it.
Exactly. Thank you so much. Bye bye, everyone.
Thank you and goodbye.
Bye bye.